Hi, I'm Old Norse Specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford, and this is just a quick video to address a word that causes a lot of confusion, and that I've seen cause a lot of confusion for many years, which is Germanic. Now, the reason that I deal with this word all the time is that I am a specialist in Germanic languages, including especially Old Norse, but my PhD minor was in other Old Germanic languages, so I also deal with Gothic, Old High German, Old Saxon, Old English, Old Frisian, etc. Now, I started teaching linguistics and the history of some of these languages way back in 2007. And I remember the first semester that I ever did, it was a class in either introductory linguistics or the history of the English language. There was a student who wrote at the end, my student vowels were always good, but in one there was someone who said, like, even though he makes this bullshit claim that English is a West German language, like, it's not, it's a West Germanic language. But I understand the confusion. The problem is, these two words come into English by two different means and through two different groups of people, basically. And since, your average person only ever encounters German, you see Germanic and you think, oh, this is related to Germany, just like dramatic is related to drama. But that's not the intent of the term. Germanic does not mean from Germany. It is not a synonym of German. I wish there were another word for these languages, but I don't have the influence to get one going. So I'm stuck with what we've got. Basically, here's sort of what happened. Let's take a look at how German comes to mean German. The cluster of, yes, Germanic languages spoken in and around Germany has lots of different names in neighboring languages. In English, it's called German. In Spanish, it's called Alemán. In Russian, it's called Niemiecki, right? The source of the last name Nimitz. And most Slavic languages call it something similar. So Spanish, as well as French and some other languages, use this term Alemán, or related terms, which come from the name of a late Roman period Germanic speaking tribe, Alemanni. Probably their name means actually like all men. The Slavic term reflected in, for example, Russian Niemiecki is, it actually means mute, means untalking, meaning, they don't speak Slavic, they speak a different language. And the English term, the term that we use today in English, comes from Latin. Now, the Romans called this group of people to their north the Germani, right? Tacitus wrote a whole book, Germania, about their customs and lands, and Caesar talks a little bit about fighting them and the Gauls in his history of the conquest of Gaul. The use of German to refer to their distant descendants and their language in English is actually an early modern phenomenon. Prior to the early modern period, the term Dutch is generally used without distinction to talk about both Low German, lowland Germanic, and High German. So basically Dutch and German, or Dutch and Low German, and then German and Swiss German, all collectively. Note that the Germans actually call their own language Deutsch, right, not German. The use of German becomes more popular into the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s. Actually, some English writers before that even used a derivative of the French term. They called them Allemagne, called the language Allemagne. So, German is not a self-designation of German speakers. It's not what they call their own language. They call it Deutsch, cognate with Dutch, a closely related language. why do we call the whole cluster of languages Germanic, and why is this a problem for English speakers? Let me give you a quick word from my friends and partners in the usual way. Be right back to talk about this a little bit more. Yeah, so as linguistics developed as a science in the 19th century, linguists wanted a way to talk about the cluster of languages that includes English, German, Dutch, Scandinavian languages, Yiddish, Gothic, many other languages closely related to and derived from these. And many of these early linguists are not, in fact, English speaking. Many of the most prominent linguists of the 19th century, early 20th century are Germans, they're French, they're Poles, and for them, German and related words don't evoke what those words evoke in English, which is Germany, right? They don't evoke Deutschland, to use the actual German term for it. So for a German to say, oh, these are the Germanic languages, it's not planting that German flag, that Deutschland flag there. It's just using this ancient Roman term, right? So when that's carried into English by people translating those works or developing those works of scholars from the continent, they're just directly translating this term, Germanic, and they're assuming that basically their audience is, 19th and early 20th century rich guys with their pinkies out around their cups of Earl Grey and another hand around, the book they're reading. They're not thinking about talking to average people whose only association with anything that looks or sounds like the word German is Germany. So that's how it comes to be, because German in the early modern period comes to be the name for this language that we used to call Dutch or High Dutch or something like that. Those things from Lowland Dutch. And then Germanic actually comes in because it's used neutrally with regard to that language by people who are speakers of that language. It's a confusing mess, and it's resulted in a confusing mess. Now, alternative terms. One term that was used sometimes in the 19th century was Teutonic. This term has fallen out of favor. It has some racialist associations, although I don't know that it really has more than Germanic. I think the main problem with this term is just that it nobody knows what it means, right? I mean, I think that a better term, if you were going to try to describe this cluster of Indo-European languages spoken in Northern Europe, would be actually it's not easy to come up with. Baltic would be neat, but Baltic is already used for another group of Indo-European languages, the one that includes Latvian and Lithuanian. You could call it Northern European or something. Like, there's not really a good, catchy alternative term that I could even propose, which nobody would take up anyway. You could try to be really fancy about it and call it like Edic, but that's probably too Scandinavian central. You could call it Gothic maybe, in tribute to the oldest language attested in the branch in any long form. That wouldn't be terrible to me. Or call it like Scando-Germanic, just to add some geographical feature that kind of splits the difference a little bit and shows that it's not just about Germany. You see what I mean? Like, it's actually kind of hard to even come up with a catchy term to replace it with. I guess you could even do like Raskic or Grimmic in tribute to Rask or Grimm, early scholars who worked on these languages. But I don't think that there's a good alternative. I think that, unfortunately, we just have to work with the language the term that we have, which in a way is a little bit ironic, because in describing language, we are always constrained by the language that we speak. right? I can't invent English. I have no influence over what words people use in English, except that I probably have, over the years, contributed slightly to a bump in the English awareness of the Old Norse term "drangr" by like 2%, so who knows. Anyway, I hope that clears up a little bit of that confusion. If you have alternative terms for this subgroup of the Indo-European languages, propose them. Maybe you can get them out there, who knows. For now, from beautiful Colorado, where it is raining, and I will take it after a week of very near wildfire. So will the elk who's been wandering around. Thanking you, those of you who support the channel on Patreon, Ko-Fi, take my Old Norse classes, read my books. You folks keep this whole thing going. And for now, I am wishing all of you all the best.